Thank you very much. Well, first of all, how about a round of applause for Brinc and Invest Hong Kong for hosting such a lovely lunch and bringing so many people together here today. I think they deserve a round of applause. Never easy putting up one of these events. So a lot of sweat equity goes into it. Can I get a sense first here who's in the audience? Can you raise your hand if you're an investor? Okay, great. And if you're somebody who does research, a PhD student or student, okay, quite a few. Wow, quite a few. How about if you're in health tech and a startup founder or in a startup? Right, quite a few. Excellent. And how many of you are just here to learn about or in the healthcare industry of any form? Oh, wow, okay. Right, and how about here just to learn? Everybody. Okay, well, look, I hope you had a good lunch and your brains are all fired up because we're about to dive right into the world of Asia's health tech innovation. And I'm very honored to have three trailblazers sitting with me. We have Dr. Neeladri Verma, I'm going to call her Neeladri from this point on, from Economist Impact, and she is dissecting research and analysis and figuring out how to help reshape healthcare policy in the region. We have Dr. SK Khor, who's with Angsana Health, CEO of Angsana Health, and he is blending technology with community health and trying to make an impact with that. And you just saw him in that booth over there doing his swallowing a pill, literally. Okay, so that's Christopher Green from Endiatx and turning robotics into something that completely innovates how we do healthcare diagnostics. This is really, I'm very pleased to be part of this. So how about we start with them telling us a little bit about them. Chris, would you tell us something about you and maybe something nobody knows, other than the fact that now we've all seen the inside of your stomach?
Sure. Here's something that no one would know if they hadn't met me, and to be honest, hadn't occurred to me that it would come full circle, I guess, in the middle of my life now, but I never knew either of my grandfathers, so my mom's dad and my dad's dad, who come from completely different ethnicities and backgrounds, and it was a long time ago, but they both died, both of them, of colon cancer before I was born. So I never met them, and it wouldn't have occurred to me again until the past few years to get involved with something that stands to solve those issues. So what you see with PillBot symbolizing a new realm of what robotic medicine can do could make it so that people don't have to grow up having not had grandparents, right? People don't have to die in their 50s of preventable diseases where a simple screening could have solved it.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. Neeladri, would you like to share something about yourself?
Thank you, Manoj. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm Neeladri Verma. I'm manager with the health practice team at Economist Impact. But something most of you might not know is I was a dentist in my previous life. I am a trained dentist from India who came to Hong Kong for MBA, and after MBA, I joined a boutique management consulting firm focusing on healthcare clients. And after that stint, I got this opportunity to work with the Economist Group, their research arm, which is called Economist Impact, and now I'm doing policy research. So it's an exciting journey which might interest some of you, and yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. Just a quick disclaimer, the things we discuss today, these would be my opinions and will not represent the opinions of my company. Thank you, nice meeting everybody.
Thank you for the disclaimer, appreciate that. And Dr. SK, I'm going to call you SK, you describe yourself to me as an accidental entrepreneur. Would you like to share a little bit more about you and also something interesting we don't know?
Thanks, Manoj, and hello everyone, 大家好. 19-year career as a health professional in medicine, pharma, global health, and now digital health, specialist in medicine, masters from Berkeley and Oxford. So this is my story. One thing that people might not know about me is I can say thank you in 65 languages.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Swahili?
Swahili kidogo.
Very good.
That means I speak a little Swahili. To say thank you in Swahili is Asante.
Asante, perfect. Right, let me fire off the question on personal journeys, because we just started with that. But before I do, I wanted to just share that I think one of the themes we're going to probably hear a lot coming out is collaboration, and how collaboration actually becomes the secret ingredient for innovation in health tech. Neeladri, could you share how you see personal journeys as actually shaping the narrative and the need for larger changes coming up in health tech and innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And as you said, collaboration is the key for innovation. And I believe that innovation cannot happen in vacuum. And all the professionals working throughout the value chain of healthcare, they have their own experiences, their challenges, their wins, and all those things develop their perspective. And that perspective is very important when it comes to innovation. They can share their pain points, and everybody's pain point could be different. A doctor could think of something, a clinician will have a different pain point versus a patient. And knowing everybody's perspective really helps come up with a better solution, more cohesive solution. And at the end, innovation is not just about technology, it's also about either adopting a new way or changing the existing ways to improve it. So I think, yes, that's my take on discussion. Yeah.
Thanks very much. SK, what motivated you to start Angsana Health?
So I had political ambitions, and politics is tough, and it was just a tool. Policy is just a tool. The end objective is to change the health system, strengthen the health system, and then save the world, right? All of us in this room want to save the world, improve health and all that. So I had political ambitions, but the political ambitions were thwarted because of Malaysian politics. So that's why the company was a pretty big reason. Maybe I'll turn the conversation back to the collaboration, but if you don't mind, and just build on what Neeladri has mentioned about collaboration, I'll share two thoughts about collaboration. Obviously, it's important, right? The first thought about collaboration is that a contract will be helpful. The contract is probably one of humanity's best inventions, allowing you to start a collaboration and start a partnership. So with a strong contract with good terms of services and schedules of services between two parties is a very good way to build enough trust to get started with collaboration. The second more practical thought about collaboration is to consider the concept in academia of multidiscipline, transdiscipline, interdiscipline. Multidiscipline, transdiscipline, and interdiscipline means three different things with very subtle nuances between all three of them. We won't go into the nuances today. The point is that the multidiscipline, interdiscipline, transdisciplinary approaches to collaboration in practice will be very helpful. To combine, like to run a genetics biobank, for example, molecular biologists and bioinformatician, maybe 6 different types of specializations. You probably need one more, say, tool for good collaboration to happen, which is a health systems connector, or somebody who can fill in the interstitium between the different silos or specializations that you're working on. So those are 2 additional thoughts about collaboration, but having answered the first question from you.
Perfect. On that point on collaboration and having a multidisciplinary approach, Chris, you've obviously had to work with others. You've also had to think about things and work in a very intensive atmosphere to innovate and create Pillbot, and as an investor too. So what's your take on those experiences and how they influence your approach when it comes to inventing something as amazing as and innovative as Pillbot?
You have to have immense personal and also as a team grit and faith in what you're doing. And even then, you're not guaranteed to succeed. But it's taken enormous sacrifice and unity among not much more than a dozen people who are basically my closest friends at this point. That's the simple answer, right? Yeah. Most startups don't succeed. Certainly most people who propose to undertake technological achievements that people doubt you can surmount don't make it unless they have that faith.
On that point of faith and having a belief often comes with obviously the people you work with and the people you can trust, but the environment that you're in. Now, we're right now here in this amazing, vibrant city of Hong Kong. I call this place home. I was born and raised here. And I cannot imagine living anywhere else except this town. But I understand that here we have two people, one from Malaysia, one from Indonesia, one from India, one from Malaysia, who've now made Hong Kong their home. And I know you're 50-50 between Malaysia and Hong Kong, but you call this a home too. What's your take on Hong Kong as a place, as a city where we should be starting all these dialogues, making these investments, and then from here catapulting to the rest of the world?
I'm a Malaysian citizen, I should be clear about that. I love Hong Kong. This is my home right now, and I believe in the long-term future of Hong Kong, and nobody's paying me to say this. Saying this because I believe in the long-term future of Hong Kong as a catalyst and as a global city in its own right, but also Hong Kong as a place for the Greater Bay Area, and then to also perhaps penetrate the rest of China as well. The rule of law in Hong Kong, the institutions in Hong Kong, the capital markets in Hong Kong, also the, let's call it capital discipline, the rigor of the softer infrastructure that Hong Kong has built, not just the buildings, right, but the judiciary, the capital systems, the banking systems, the financial systems, will all be very helpful for Hong Kong to bounce back. So those are my more geostrategic thoughts about Hong Kong, if you will. Back to you, Manokj.
Perfect. And Neeladri, what is your, I mean, you do research and analytics, and you are a think tank, you know, and then you try to make an impact with that. What's your perception of how Hong Kong helps, as a place like that, you've moved here, helps for startups trying to innovate? And what are the challenges?
So I think Hong Kong is trying to position itself as an innovation hub. We all know Hong Kong is a banking hub, a financial hub, but now there is a lot of government direction towards creating that brand for Hong Kong as an innovation hub. There was a recent study, the global innovative cities in the world, and Hong Kong was ranked second in that. It was in 2023. So that's something which really speaks about what all is happening here. If you have seen the budget, the government has sort of given around 2 billion out of the 10 billion investment to InvestHK, which is sort of a platform to promote R&D. And there are, if I'm not wrong, and I could be wrong, so there are two sort of separate sectors which they're focusing on. One is health, and the other one is AIR, which is AI research. And so it just shows to the interest the government has, and that's something which really helps any startup creators. I think government support is important. The other thing, as SK mentioned, is the positioning of Hong Kong, the connection with the GBA, but also the collaboration with the Asian market. So I think that makes Hong Kong really good position, place to attract talent. Having said that, we have seen a lot of initial interest in policies. There's still things which we need to see how things evolve. We also have to think about, when we talk about startups, it's not just the government capital, it's also sometimes the private investment. So all those things are yet to, evolve here, but I do think that the first step has already been taken, and I think it's a great city. I call it Hong Kong, and I completely echo SK's sentiments about Hong Kong. I think it's a great place, a vibrant city.
Thanks for that. Now, Chris, you're not from Hong Kong. Your company's California-based. You're from the US. You grew up in Massachusetts, I believe. And you do all your innovation, technological development in the United States, and all your R&D. But I understand your goal is to pivot to the Asia-Pacific region, and Hong Kong could be a hub for that, right? So could you tell us about that?
Hong Kong certainly will be the hub for that, and I would echo what SK and Neeladri have said here, is that we felt extremely welcomed and encouraged by several aspects of how technology is made to blossom here, and people express a pride in bringing companies in general, but actually American companies in particular. And we look to expand through the Greater Bay Area to Asia, where in the instance of Pillbot, instances of gastric cancer in particular are very high. So we know that this is where the most people in the world could benefit from what we're doing, and we feel extremely encouraged. I might add that between the last time we made a large-scale visit, meeting with a lot of venture capital firms, about a year and a half ago until now, a lot has come to fruition, and we've made good on the promises to them in delivering this technology, and it's just nice to see people again and bask in the glow of their encouragement to bring this to a whole new region.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Now, you've innovated a very transformative, I mean, I think we all saw that pill going down and then seeing your insides. I mean, we know more about you now than a lot of people do. But you're flanked by two professionals from the medical profession. I mean, traditional medical industry.
Yep.
How do you think the technology and the innovation you do, how's that going to impact, how's that going to be received by the traditional industry?
So this is a classic question, right? And one that you often get from venture capitalists and people who are considering any investment in your company is some version of how do you displace the establishment, or how do you deal with, disrupt, right? Of course, not displace, of course. But will there be pushback or entrenchment or inertia? And we have a good answer to that. Our case is that no, Pillbot will augment the workflow of the GI sector. It'll allow doctors to much more quickly and efficiently streamline their workflow, because they'll be able to use Pillbot immediately at low cost and low personnel use rather than delay and expense. So in addition to obviously saving lives and improving the patient experience, it'll make the doctor's workflow better and ultimately increase the number of the traditional legacy procedures that are undertaken. So imagine a world where Pillbot can be shipped to your home and does an automated exam of your stomach, and you go to do a subsequent EGD, right, the full invasive exam, only if it's been deemed necessary. So you reprioritize the use of resources, which is beneficial both in developed countries and in parts of the world where they have very little access yet.
Right, so in that trend, can you see a future where there's going to be the next step where you know, if you want to check again, you can always order something like a Pillbot and get that, or automatically get an appointment with your doctor if you need to?
You can. There are a couple of long-term visions. Obviously, you could use a subsequent Pillbot to follow up. So you could have an initial procedure, and imagine it finds just gastritis, for which there's a very simple pharmaceutical regime as the solution, and an additional Pillbot confirms that it's been dealt with just a few weeks later. Then there's the even more beautiful and broad vision of where we want to bring this, which is prophylactic screening. So suppose that people, once you're perhaps 40 years old, every 24 months, you could use Pillbot for upper GI screening, just the way that we are encouraging people now to get colonoscopy, so that you don't have to be like me and have not met people who died from what should now be preventable diseases. So society-wide screening will be made feasible by low-cost, single-use disposable micro-robotic devices like the one that we're developing here.
All right, thanks for that. Neeladri, on hearing what Chris has just said, how do you think in your research and your analysis, what have you found as to be the adaptability or the impact of non-health players and disruptors? How do they impact and cause the adaptation of for the healthcare professionals?
Well, I believe disruptors inspire innovation. So not only they are disrupting the field, but also they are pushing the traditional players to think a little differently. And I'm not saying that it's always easy. Sometimes it's resistance in the beginning, and then you have those stages when people come to understand the benefits and then sort of imbibe that into their general practice. I think if you look at the trend, the mega tech like Google or Apple or Meta, everybody has shown interest in health. And if you look at their journey, I think it started somewhere late 2000s, and that time there were a lot of failures those companies experience and the model they are using right now is a sort of they're acquiring the smaller, the successful ventures. And a great example, I think, is because of the recent news around the Nobel Prize in chemistry is DeepMind, which was a British company acquired by Google in 2014. And so you see that DeepMind has not only is changing things, you know, in tech or health tech, but is also disrupting how medicine can be developed, and it is going to eventually impact the overall healthcare. So I believe that there is there has to be a collaboration, and that's what the future looks for. The mindset of not thinking this as a threat, but thinking of how, for example, the technology which Chris shared, it's something which can be so beneficial to, you know, bring care at home. And when we talk about these overburdened health systems and having something, you know, taking it to the community care or home care, I think those are the sort of conversations now everybody needs to think about, and I think that's the future of health.
Right. You bring up the point of community care and collaboration. One of the biggest collaborators any startup needs, any company needs is, you know, fundraisers, funding, right? So I'm going to pivot now to you because she mentioned community health. How, and also on this quote that I heard you once say, and I'm going to quote this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to use this. SK had said, he mentioned the importance of manufacturing consensus among stakeholders. Now, how does this play a role in how you went through your journey on collaborating with investors and fundraisers as you developed Angsana Health?
Wow, I'm quiet because great question. No, I don't think I've ever manufactured consensus between investors. It'd be great though. Like you get a bunch of investors in a room and you get a consensus from them about the quality of your company and get them to invest like $1 billion into your company. Unfortunately, haven't done that yet. However, I'll describe the statement of manufacturing consensus and say it was. The term manufacturing consensus is used more in healthcare policies and healthcare policy advocacy, which was my area of specialization before I went to the digital health and the startup world. Meaning, I'll give an explanation about that. I'll talk a bit about data and talk about community health in these three buckets. Yeah, manufacturing consensus means that governments, generally speaking, want to talk to one party only. Governments don't want to talk to multiple parties at the same time. Why? Because it's difficult, the coordination costs are difficult, and it's just not pleasant to talk to multiple people. So if people outside the government, defined as academia, professional societies, the private sector, patient groups and all that, are coalescing into a consortium. So I co-founded the Malaysian Health Coalition, which has 53 professional societies. The doctors, the nurses, the paramedics, everything is under one coalition. And the Malaysian Health Coalition is a manufacturer of consensus. What we did is that we got a consensus statement for all 53 professional societies, and we present the memorandum to the government. So the government has got no hiding place, because I can't play divide and conquer and talk to Manokj and talk to Neeladri and talk to Chris and get three different positions, because all three of you have agreed, so the government has no choice but to follow you. That's manufacturing consensus. If I may build on what Neeladri has mentioned just now and move to a new position, for all the startuppers out there, can I offer you 4 evidence generation sectors or topics? The first one is you have to manufacture some form of consensus. You need to have clinical evidence. Is the product safe and effective? Then, almost in sequence, number 2, is the product cost effective or cost efficient? Is a health economics data generation or evidence generation? So clinical evidence, health economics evidence, patient-reported outcomes, and real-world evidence are number 3 and number 4. Patient-reported outcomes, an example would be SF36 or short form 36 questions about a particular technology, or HRQOL, or health-related quality of life questionnaire. And that's an example of patient-reported outcomes. Fourthly and finally is a real-world evidence in the form of a registry. If you have all 4, clinical, economic, patient-reported, and real-world evidence, your product will be unstoppable. Nobody will say no to your product, and that's a form of consensus. Finally, about the community and manufacturing consensus for the community is, frequently, when designing a product or health tech solution, we forget the patient. We talk a lot about patient centricity. There's a lot of talk about design thinking and principles, empathy, all that, right? yeah, theory is great, but where is the patient? Did you involve a patient in the very beginning? It's really tough to involve patients, right? For ethical reasons and access reasons, and patients tell you a lot of, for every 100 minutes of information that the patient gives you, only 1 minute is usable, but just unfortunately quite necessary. We have to force ourselves to involve the patient, because that's probably the ultimate manufacturing of the consensus. Yeah, sorry for a long answer.
No, that's fine. It gives a lot of context to it. On the point of government funding or governments being involved in this, Chris, actually, you mentioned the word having a significant amount of faith in order to do what you do. And no doubt, being based in the US, you've approached government to, government bodies, or maybe try to get grants for research. And could you tell us a little bit about that journey in fundraising activities?
First of all, I wrote a good fraction of the government grant applications myself, and I don't mean to sound at all cynical. I just wish that there were an easier way of doing it, because we didn't get any money for this from the government.
All right.
So I either did it badly, or the people helping me did it badly, or the people on the other side basically doubted that it was practical. And we now, in the past couple of years, have proven them wrong, and we've managed to acquire capital without their help. I certainly would have preferred if there were a streamlined, succinct mechanism to propose and receive funding for an early stage visionary product under the auspices of the United States government in some regard, but we were unable to marshal that at the time when we most needed it. Perhaps it will come around later. If they're listening to this conversation, I'm still available, so please be in touch with me to talk about government grants.
Is there an easy way to streamline the process, to make it really straightforward and easy for any investor or anyone trying to build a technology?
I would propose that they instate something like that, but as near as I can determine, there are many different agencies that are deeply bureaucratic and hierarchic, and again, I don't mean to sound negative, but as much as basically the people who most need the grants are least able to access the grant money, essentially is what it comes down to. So if you yourself are not already wealthy or connected to wealthy family members, and none of the other employees in a small company are, you don't have access to the hopeful support when you most desperately need it. At least that was my experience. Again, perhaps it will come around and I will be proven wrong, but we've made do despite that because of just grit and diligence.
Well, I'll go to the point on grit and diligence. No easy task. On governments and the whole process of funding and getting them to rethink, you've done a lot of research in this area. Would you please share with us, what do you think would be the most effective strategies any government should take, whether it's Hong Kong or any other ecosystem, on pushing out digital health solutions and innovation in digital health?
Yeah, so I think governance plays a great role, and the role of government is not only to have the right kind of regulations in place so that once a health technology out, it's well assessed. There's also a role which governance plays in setting up more streamlined sort of steps when it comes to the initial stages of technology being created and generated. So I think that needs to be streamlined, and it's again something which can be helped with taking the experiences of people who have been through that journey and understand what were the challenges. So governments could engage with those people to understand what are the gaps in the way they operate and how they could improve it. So that's one thing. The other thing, again, is, I think it might not be true for Hong Kong, but if we think of Asia, sometimes we have to also understand that an infrastructure support, that's something which is a very basic thing for a digital health to be successful. So is there access to internet? Is there that sort of capability present in the country? And the digital health is not just the purview of health sector. So there needs to be a multi-sectoral collaboration. The government, the Ministry of Health needs to collaborate with maybe ICT, even Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Education if you want to promote digital health. So there has to be an intersectoral collaboration when they are trying to build an environment pro-digital health. There also needs to be sort of a roadmap. They should think about creating a strategic plan. A lot of countries, for example, Indonesia has developed this a digital health strategy, and I think that's something which is essential. You can have all the ideas, but how do you vision, how do you think that those ideas are going to roll out? That's something a strategic plan gives you. And then after that, it should not just be at the level of strategy, not just talk, but you have to walk the talk. So again, how do you implement it? Do you have like specific timelines, a very defined roadmap? And the roadmap has to evolve. It cannot be like, you know, it's very strict. If I don't meet my timelines, but you have to see how you're revising it. So I think these are sort of the things which, you know, from a governance standpoint. The other aspect of digital health comes around trust, comes around privacy. So making sure that there is, you know, cybersecurity, everything. So GDPR, which is in Europe, very common. So all those sort of regulations, again, you know, help make a government connect the gaps between what people want to achieve versus where they are. Yeah, I think that's my 2 cents.
Okay. On getting funding from a government is never easy. Getting funding even from private individuals and family offices is never easy either, but it's a lot of grit as you need, as Chris mentioned. But Chris, maybe you could share with us if you've ever had the experience of a vicious cycle where, you know, there's a proof of concept you need to show a government body or proof of concept you need to show an individual investor, and then they'll say, well, come back to me when it's funded or come back to me when you prove it, but you need the money to prove it in order to, it's a chicken and egg, right?
So of course,
it's
a chicken and egg, and that's the fundamental challenge and slog of launching any enterprise when you don't already have access to the money that you need. From my personal viewpoint, I would say if you zoom all the way out, the market is reality and enforces what is more or less true. But when you're deep in the weeds and you're the person acting as the intermediary who's being ignored or dismissed or told to basically circle back once you've reached the next milestone, that of course you desperately need the money to sustain yourself, that does not comfort you at all, right? And that is what dissuades people from spending years of their lives undertaking something as difficult and groundbreaking as what we've done with Pillbot, or probably indeed what the other startups here have managed to achieve. So I don't have a perfect answer to it. I can tell you this, I wouldn't want to do it again. So we as the founders in this company, we have agreed we're doing this once with all of our hearts all the way through, once. We're not doing this again, right? Yeah. We're going to build this company. It's going to be what we do for the rest of our lives.
Fantastic. And that's a huge path of faith. But whenever you innovate, you need to regulate, right? The governments will regulate and make sure what you're providing out in the healthcare industry or health tech industry will be okay. SK, could you share with us your experience on working with regulators and like medical advisory boards? I mean, the coalition's a great solution. Could you share with that journey? What was it like?
Neutral experience to the journey. Of course, every journey will have pros and cons, goods and bads, right? Without going to the goods and bads and pros and cons, is to make a few more passive neutral observations about the government as a regulator. Before I make any more remarks, anybody from the government over here? We love you. Anybody from the government?
Oh, there's
thank you very much.
There? Yeah.
So there's a couple of you. The experience is for Angsana in Malaysia and a little bit in Southeast Asia is neutral. Why? Because the laws are mostly silent in innovation. Mostly, as a general principle, laws are silent about innovation in almost any country that you're in. Meaning to say that the laws don't specifically allow, neither do the laws specifically prohibit. in that gray area, it's difficult for us to navigate. We're speaking only about regulation, right? So if it's not explicitly allowed and it's not explicitly prohibited, in that gray area, it depends on the governments of the day. Some governments are more cautious, and they'll tell you, don't take any action unless we expressly say yes. Some governments will be a little bit more free, and they'll say, go until we say no, go until we say stop, right? So how you navigate the regulations in those countries depends on the political system and also the political social contract that you might have. For our friends in the government, you may wish to consider 3 things. And for those outside of the government, consider asking your government or the government in the country that you're living in for 3 things. The first one is a regulatory sandbox. In this sandbox, you can do what you want within the parameters. The parameters are mutually agreed. Consider a sandbox, formalize a sandbox, put it into writing. Very important, very helpful. Number 2, consider matching grants in a progressive tiers of matching grants. You heard it here. New concept like governments give a grant of $50,000 that matches what you raise from the private sector, 1-to-1, up to a maximum of 50,000. Example, then you got 100K. You come back in 3 months' time, you prove some milestones, we give you another 250. You come back in 6 months' time, you give you another 500, then off you go to raise your seed round or Series A. And that progressive milestones or progressive matching grants will be something that you can reasonably and realistically ask your government for. Governments love matching grants, you know, public-private partnerships and all that. So sandbox, progressive grants. The third thing about the government is access to data. One thing about digital health companies, specifically only digital health, not about the medtech or biotech devices, is that digital health and AI and analytics require huge amounts of data. Governments are possessive about their data. Why? Because governments don't want private sector or non-government entities to weaponize the data against them. There are many countries, right, in which universities find it difficult to access data from the Ministry of Health. Repeat, universities find it difficult to access. Hello, John. Sorry, I'll complete the thought. Universities find it difficult to access data from Ministry of Health, even though they're public universities. So public universities belong to the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health belongs to the government. They're both government agencies and ministries. Why is it difficult for universities to access data from the Ministry of Health hospitals? Because universities have access to data and then wrote very demeaning articles and say, yeah, Ministry of Health can do better. So long and short is that if government can create a safe space for data to be shared in a data lake, with a promise that the data will not be weaponized against the government, that's very helpful for the growth of any company. So 3 things, right? The sandbox, progressive tiering for matching grants, show milestones, you get more grants, and thirdly, a data lake with safeguards built in that the data cannot be weaponized against the government, then the government will feel more reassured and more confident that they can share the data. And I think these are 3 very important success factors. Back to you.
Excellent, thank you. In fact, on that point, I will ask the last question of the panel. What, in your opinion, what could Hong Kong learn from? I mean, you've seen how it's done in many countries. What could Hong Kong learn on how to, taking on what SK had just mentioned, what could Hong Kong learn from other jurisdictions on growing and innovating in health tech?
Yeah, I completely agree with the point around sandbox, and I think one example I have in mind is Singapore. Singapore has shown a great example of how they use sandbox to bring innovations to the market. They started a sandbox, I think in 2018, it was called LEAP. It was for the telehealth and mobile health companies, and way before pandemic. And then the sandbox had achieved its objectives by 2021. So now they're sort of rolling it out to general public. So I think that's one example. And now they're working on this health innovation sandbox. I think it's called Chisel. So Center of Healthcare Innovation, something like that. And it's again an interesting sandbox where they're bringing together the various healthcare innovations which are sort of ready to market, which they feel can be, shared with the patients or the consumers, and to test it in that sandbox, how viable these are. So I think it's a very interesting model, and a lot of, not only Hong Kong, a lot of countries or economies could learn from that system.
Excellent. So now, how about we pivot to all of you? We'd love to hear from you. Any questions you'd like to ask our 3 trailblazers here? Please, we have mics floating around. And please don't be shy. Anybody? No, wow, quiet crowd. How about the investors out there? Any questions? Okay. Well, then how about this? I will leave you with one parting thought. Maybe you could share with us, if you look back at your childhood, all right, and look at today, what would your today tell maybe your 15-year-old about the journey you're on right now? Could you share your thoughts on that? Any advice you would give your younger self?
Well, I could go first, but it's going to be predictable, right? It's like quit playing playing around, buy real estate, buy Bitcoin, buy gold, right?
And so you can afford to
acquire
innovate.
assets. Yeah. Stop joking around and imagine you're going to live forever because you're going to wake up and be 40 and wish you made something of yourself sooner and had an easier track, right? So I know it's what do they say? Like your parents annoy you and then you become them, right?
Yes.
You end up repeating all the same things that they told you. But sure, that's such is the definition of youth, right?
And for innovation, if you look back at your young self, what would you have told young SK?
Look, young SK.
Young, it's still young.
Yeah, true. Even current SK is like foolish, right? Great question. I've not thought about this question before, so I don't have a pithy answer or even a good answer. However, my conversations with my younger self would be more philosophical than just talking about innovation. If we talk about the importance of luck and fate and timing, the importance of chemistry when finding a business partner and collaborations, that intelligence alone is not going to fix all the problems in the world, that you need many other things that are outside of your control. You need to build coalitions of the willing, the relevant, the able, coalition of the willing, the relevant, and the able to come together for you to achieve a mission. No man is an island, that we can't do this all by ourselves and everything. These are more philosophical thoughts, you know. So maybe, you know what? Now I've got a pithy statement. The pithy statement here is that everybody in this room is science-based, right? We're trained in logic. Logos guides us, right? There's causality, there's a chain of logic, you press the button A, we want to get to B. We love science and evidence-based medicine and all the randomized controlled trials out there, but life is not RCTs. Life is so much more complicated than that, and it took me several years to come to grips with that as well. So maybe that's what I'll tell my younger self, that science and logic alone is not enough to save the world.
And on that one, that's wonderful. Can I pass it to Neeladri? What would she tell her younger self before she became a dentist?
Yeah, I would just tell her that don't take life so seriously. Don't plan so much. I always wanted to become a doctor, and when I was a dentist, now, I left that career. I went to career transition. So things happen, life changes, and you can't be very critical of yourself. We should be more appreciative, and, we should be our best champion. Like, if you're not appreciating yourself enough, perhaps no one else would. So I think I was very, very critical. I've grown up in an Asian family, so I mean, you can imagine. And for me, India is also like Asia, right? So yeah,
It is still in Asia.
It is. So yeah, I think I would also tell her that, one thing cannot define you, especially like your profession doesn't define you. You can be a lot more. You can be a dentist, you can be a doctor, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be a researcher, you can be everything. So don't be siloed by what you choose to do as a career. Explore yourself and keep exploring. Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. So I'm hearing the word faith come out. I'm hearing the word consensus. I'm hearing the word collaboration. I'm going to leave with one parting thought, and that is, to me, any innovation is like a great potluck dinner party. Everyone brings a great dish, but it's the collaboration of those dishes put together that really makes the dinner a successful one, and there's people. So with that, I'd like to ask you to give a round of applause for the three trailblazers here, SK, Chris, and Neeladri. Thank you very much for your attention, and on to the next speakers.